Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am super thrilled to dive into some truly fascinating source material with you today. We're going to be looking at a text by the Arab thinker Ali Muhammad Al-Shurafa, and it's titled, Returning to the Quran to Protect Nations. What we're unpacking here is a really unique framework. It basically flips our expectations entirely, taking ancient spiritual texts and positioning them as practical, literal blueprints for modern civic life. So instead of just viewing these writings as, matters of personal theology or private faith, the author actually presents them as a comprehensive, actionable guide for national security, social cohesion, and literally the survival of a society in the modern world.
Okay, let's dive into this, because it all starts with a massive, existential question. What exactly prevents a nation from collapsing into total division and ultimately falling into foreign occupation? It's a question that has haunted civilizations for centuries, right? And it's just as relevant today. Well, Al-Shurafa's text tackles this head-on. He argues that the answer isn't just about stockpiling weapons or drawing up complex economic policies or building huge physical walls. Rather, it's fundamentally about the social fabric of a society. It's about a strict adherence to a specific moral compass that keeps citizens united against internal decay.
To unpack the author's cause-and-effect framework, we've mapped out today's explainer into 5 quick parts. First, a roadmap to protect nations. Second, the 3 divine commands. Third, the methodology of peace. Fourth, the threat of division. And finally, the global message of peace.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, a roadmap to protect nations.
So Al-Shurafa's central thesis here is actually pretty striking. He posits that Quranic principles are absolutely not meant to be these abstract, ethereal guidelines completely disconnected from reality. Instead, they function as a direct, literal blueprint for national security and social harmony. According to the text, protecting the homeland isn't just a job for the army or the government. It requires every single individual to unite and actively follow these divine legislations in their ordinary, everyday interactions. It's a deeply structural view of society, kind of like a giant puzzle, where civic duty and religious adherence are entirely intertwined. Basically, the argument is you just can't have a protected community without this foundational, shared behavioral code.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast the text presents. On one side, you have security, peace, and blessings. The author argues this is the natural, inevitable result of a society actually following this blueprint. When the rules are applied, everybody gets to live a stable, decent life. But look at the exact opposite side. The alternative is extraordinarily severe: collapse, occupation, and displacement. What makes this framework so compelling is that there's zero middle ground. A society is either actively building its security through these principles of unity, or just through negligence and division, it's passively inviting its own destruction.
Which brings us to part 2, the 3 divine commands.
The author actually anchors his entire argument on 3 specific verses. The first foundational rule is based on a quote from Al-Imran, verse 103, and hold firmly to the rope of Allah altogether and do not become divided. The text interprets this as a strict, non-negotiable mandate against sedition, rumors, and literally anything that sows discord. By actively rejecting things that cause internal friction, a society maintains its essential unity, and Al-Shurafa ties this unity directly to achieving a secure life for every single individual. Division, in this model, isn't just a minor political headache, it is the very first fatal crack in a nation's armor. Once that crack forms, the whole shebang is compromised.
So the crucial point is really driven home in the second command, from Al-Ma'idah, verse 2. And cooperate in righteousness and piety, but do not cooperate in sin and aggression. Notice the emphasis on action here. It's not enough to just passively avoid dividing the nation. Citizens have to actively cooperate. The civic necessity of positive, societal collaboration is explicitly mandated. To build a stable nation, it takes a collective, proactive effort toward what is good for the community, while strictly refusing to assist in any aggressive or sinful behavior that would tear that social fabric apart.
And then we have the third command from Al-Anfal, verse 46, and obey Allah and His Messenger, and do not dispute, and thus lose courage, and then your strength would depart. Al-Shurafa uses this verse to point out a very practical, almost physical reality. Internal societal disputes literally drain a nation of its strength and resilience. Think about it. When citizens are constantly fighting amongst themselves, they lose their collective courage and their momentum. Their energy is entirely wasted internally, which leaves the homeland incredibly vulnerable and weak whenever it faces external threats.
Let's move to part 3 and see how this all comes together, the methodology of peace.
So, if those 3 commands are the rules, how does this actually build a practical framework for everyday behavior? According to the text, a secure society relies completely on these specific localized traits:
dialogue, wisdom, good advice, tolerance, and kindness. This is exactly how conflicts have to be resolved on the ground. Instead of instantly responding with aggression or defensiveness, citizens are required to use good advice and deep tolerance. It's a methodology of continuous peace building on a microscopic interpersonal level. The author suggests that when you multiply these small kind interactions across millions of citizens, they scale up to protect the entire nation.
And when a society successfully implements this methodology, the text outlines a crystal clear cause and effect relationship that results in a divine reward, literally warding off disasters, crises, and worries to ensure a stable, prosperous life. The author makes a direct correlation here. Applying peaceful, cooperative behavior isn't just about, feeling good. It leads to concrete, divine protection. In this state, a society is blessed with a life of comfort, systematically insulated from the devastating national crises that usually plague divided nations. The reward for interpersonal peace is quite literally national prosperity.
But what happens when we ignore this? That leads us to part 4, the threat of division.
Now, what's really interesting and frankly pretty sobering about this slide is how clearly the text traces a specific, tragic cascade of failure. It operates almost like an unyielding law of physics. Step 1. Disobedience and dispute creep into the society. Step 2. This internal friction leads to a direct, measurable loss of national strength and unity. Step 3. Without that collective strength, broader societal collapse becomes completely inevitable. And finally, Step 4. The weakened, collapsed nation falls victim to foreign occupation, colonialism, and the ruthless looting of its wealth. It is a devastating domino effect, and it's triggered simply by citizens turning against one another.
The text makes sure to emphasize the ultimate stakes here, and they are profoundly devastating. We are not just talking about a minor economic downturn or a bad election cycle. We are talking about the physical enslavement of citizens, the absolute loss of the homeland, and the eternal displacement of its people. The author paints a very stark picture. Ignoring this blueprint of unity doesn't just hurt the nation temporarily. It risks the permanent, irreversible loss of a society's very existence and freedom.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, the global message of peace.
The source material concludes by introducing the International Message of Peace Foundation. This is an institution entirely dedicated to reminding people of these exact concepts we just went over. Their mission is basically a persistent call to action, urging individuals all across the globe to return to the Quran's commands, not just for individual spiritual fulfillment, mind you, but to actively maintain their security, their righteousness, and the physical safety of their homelands. They serve as a constant institutional reminder of this blueprint, working to make sure these foundational rules for harmony aren't forgotten.
And that leaves us with one final, deeply profound question to end today's explainer. Will societies adopt this blueprint of unity to secure their future, or let division lead to their absolute ruin? The text makes it abundantly clear that the choice doesn't just sit with politicians or leaders. It rests in the daily behaviors, the tolerance, and the unity of a nation's everyday citizens. That's you and me. It is an incredibly powerful and challenging lens through which to view our own civic responsibility. Thank you so much for joining me as we unpack this fascinating text today. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.
مؤسسة رسالة السلام العالمية، رسالة إنسانية لعالم أكثر سلاماً.